Oh my God, it's Saturday morning. Who do I see on my screen? My
Good
dear
morning,
friend
sir.
Dewey Freeman. I'm Mark Sylvester. We're the Elder Council. Dewey, for those who listened to our last show, we were talking about mentoring, and you told us that you had just come off of you were at the midpoint of a 2 week course where you were doing Aikido in the morning. Hey, ladies and gentlemen who are listening, this is like a fifth, sixth Dan Aikido master. I don't know what the
I
exact
wouldn't go
number
so
is.
far as that.
Okay, but he's not a white belt, let's say that. And in the
That part's
afternoons,
true.
you were working on horses, and I remember you saying specifically, I mean, you've been doing both for a long time, yet there was this, because it was an intensive, you learned so much. And the thing that I remembered was when you said, when you're holding the horse, you're holding the reins this way. It's probably the wrong way to hold reins. Don't look to Mark to teach you how to hold reins. But you said that you would get the note like, no, raise your hand a little bit. Everything was so nuanced. It's kind of like I was thinking when I've got a really sharp blade as a chef, but I still put a couple of strokes with a steel on it because it could be a little sharper. So
Right.
now we're at the end of the second week, so that's done. Amazing. You had said you'd spent a year planning to be able to open this space in your calendar to take 2 weeks off. God love you for doing that. Um, but it didn't end exactly the way you thought. Tell us about that.
Well, here's the interesting thing about it. And the work in the dojo and the work with my horse was incredible. I very well may have learned more in those 2 weeks around both Aikido and horsemanship than I've ever learned in any segment of my life. And here's what's really interesting. So much, the reason we do Aikido and horsemanship together is Aikido is about blending with whatever's coming toward you, with you being relaxed and soft inside, and then moving that energy through. That's the exact same thing that we're trying to do with horses. We're trying to blend with our horse and work with the energy that they're giving us and directing that energy. And the idea is, and I've talked about this before, is that I, thou, which is if I were to explain that, it would be I, me, and thou is you, and not objectifying the other, which, so I'm not objectifying I, thou versus I, it. When we objectify the other, we're making them its. Ultimately, when we're blending, we're taking I and thou and creating a we. So it's like, I'm not going to go, my horse's name is Moon. I'm not going to say trot Moon. Moon and I are going to trot together. We're going to trot.
Let's trot.
We're going to side pass. We're going to stop. So the interesting thing for me, so around those areas, around those arenas, and no pun intended, it was the best 2 weeks I've had. And I've changed my relationship and reset my relationship with my horse. What was also interesting was the relationships in the group. Although everyone was very kind and respectful, there was no relationship in the group, or very little.
Even though you were in an intensive, immersive experience with 10 other people, you weren't ironically, you were in an exercise to learn how to connect, and you felt profoundly disconnected to the humans.
exactly. And people would spend the day connecting with their horse, and then at night people would disperse. For instance, I was there, it was 5 days, a weekend off, and 5 more days. I did not go out to dinner with anyone. Every
Hmm.
evening I ate by myself. And there were 10 to 12 other people there. And I couldn't even find people. It was on a big ranch. So it was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go check and see if so and so wants to go to dinner. And it was like, you couldn't even find people.
Hmm.
And so it was a pretty interesting piece. By the time I got home, I felt fairly deleted in that aspect. So it was an interesting piece. On one aspect, I felt incredibly full and grateful. And on the other aspect, I felt like, where is everybody?
Hmm.
What's going on with everybody?
The word that came into my mind, which is going to be the title of the show, is lost in a crowd.
Yes. And 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 here's what I think happened.
Hmm.
And you and I have talked about, we were chatting a little bit before we got on about the idea of excuse me, the idea of, some people say that 15% of what we do is conscious and 85% of what we do is
Yeah.
subconscious. That's not particularly where I live. I Go ahead.
What I saw again, I think in pictures, right? So I saw a bell curve of consciousness, and I think at the top of that bell curve might be the 85-15, and you're on the far right side of that, where I don't know if it's inverted, but maybe it's 50-50.
Yeah, and I would say 50-50, and on a good day, even a little more, maybe 60-40, where most of what I do is pretty conscious and aware.
So
But
explain this. The reason that this idea is so important to me is we're talking about head and heart, right? We're talking about,
yes,
you know, intellectually, how do I show up in the world? Emotionally, how am I showing up the world? Cognitively, how am I showing up? Physically, how am I showing up in the world?
yes,
And the whole me is my subconscious and my conscious, yet I feel like I'm not. This is an ironic scene. I'm not consciously tapped into my subconscious. Man, there's a mind fuck.
exactly. However, well, part of what we're trying to do, I think, in the world is create openings for other people. And
Which
we've
we've talked a
spoken
lot
about that.
about. So is this an opening for myself, for
Yes.
ourselves? Got it.
It's, can we create an opening
Hmm. Hmm.
and step into that opening for ourselves?
Hmm.
Can we do that? Can we um, and are we willing to do that? And are we actually willing to see what's there?
There's the nub of it, isn't it? Maybe that's a little
And
scary.
it's scary. It's at times incredibly overwhelming. Um, yeah, it's big, and there's a lot of ways to protect ourselves from seeing what's there,
Oh
whether it
yeah.
be with ourselves. Yeah,
That's called being unconscious.
right.
And
And in this particular group, I could not, no matter when we would be at lunch or things like that, the number of superficial conversations were, I've never been. It's like, oh, well, what kind of mattress do you have? And oh, I have this kind of mattress in my camper and this kind, and that kind of conversation would go on for 30 minutes.
Mm.
And
I mean, it wasn't podcast worthy conversation.
that would be true. So I'm wandering here a bit. One of eh, one of the things that inspired me early on with Man Uncivilized was Prager's 12 Tenets.
Mm.
One of the things that I took from that was I put together what I thought was going to be my 12 tenets, and I came up with 14 or 15. One of the last tenets is that what I want to do is share who I am, not tell stories about other people's experiences.
Man, so right there is a whole show. Because as we are storytellers, because you and I are both storytellers, we're of a belief that I do not have permission to tell someone else's story ever. Just
Right.
straight up. I just don't do it. That's not my story to tell. And storytelling, because I'm actually writing a story. I'm doing a workshop next weekend and I need a story to
Mm.
kick it off. So Kimberly and I, she's my story coach, Mike Kimberly, sat in at dinner last night, went through the kind of, I pitched 3 ideas and she goes, I like that one. And she says, let's work on that one. And we used her 5S method for doing it. But we got into the struggle part of the story because you're telling me the struggle was
Mm-hmm.
this profound sense of disconnection to the other group, and as much as you maybe tried to create an opening, or for sure you noticed none of them purposely tried to create an opening for any of that.
Or would step into an opening I created.
Exactly. And she said to me during the struggle of my story, she goes, we, the listener, don't really care about the details. Honestly, how
No,
did you
that's accurate.
feel during the struggle? That's what we want to know. And to
Yes.
your point of, I want to have real authentic stories, and it's the story is, yes, I need to have the trappings so someone can put themselves, for me, a visual thinker, put themselves in that space. But how did you feel in there, man? Were you scared? Were you lonely? Were you
Mm-hmm.
happy? Were you ecstatic? Were not of the all those kind of things, which I think in my case, I had to tap into a whole different part of me as I
Right.
was writing the story last night to figure out, well, how did I feel about that? Not the what happened, it was how I felt about it. And I think that's to your point of why you feel disappointed today.
Yes. When they're exactly instead of there being a sharing of our processes. So when you and I share with each other, it's like, this is my process. This is what my gut is. This is what's going on here. That's very different than telling you a story about, well, on day 3 of my workshop, so and so said such and such, and then they did, and um,
Meanwhile, I'm checking my email in my head.
right, and we tend to do that. In
Yeah.
2010, I busted my pelvis very badly in a horse accident. People would see me limping around while I was healing and say, hey, what's happening? And I would say, blah, blah, blah happened. I came off my horse and busted my pelvis on almost to probably 99% of the time. People go, well, my uncle and busted. And it's like that disconnect is a huge part of what disconnects us from who we are.
Stay with that for a second, because I've identified that in myself last 40 years. And it's a constant battle for me, because I've done so much in my life. Something triggers something that person said triggers a memory that now I want to share that memory, and that turns it to be about me rather than me reacting to them. And a simple thing would, how did that make you feel? I love to program coded responses into myself until when I'm trying to do behavior modification. Like, I
Hmm.
didn't take compliments very well. Just by example, I didn't take compliments very well. When I was 19, I was in a workshop and I was taught, we had this exercise. Someone would compliment me, and all you were allowed to say was thank you. You had to hear it
Right.
and just say thank you. That's hard to do. And now, to this exact point, I want to be the 0.1% when someone says something that I don't instantly hit the recall button and tell you my thing. And it's not about one upping, it's about yes anding. But to your point about having a deeper connection, you could say, wow, how'd that make you feel? Or how did you handle that? Or anything that kept it about them.
Exactly. And we can also speak about ourselves if we allow ourselves to share what's truly happening about for us. When there are many times where you share something and like some of your successes and some of your great ideas and some of your uh, super creative projects, and I'm going, I am so excited. When I hear this, I'm buzzing inside, and I do. And or if there's a loss with somebody, it's like, yes, can feel that sadness. That's different than, our neighbor 2 days ago had to put down their dog.
Oh, um,
And that's different than going, yeah, I've had to put down
right,
8 dogs in my life.
right,
And it's
right.
versus going,
Just give him a hug.
oh,
I want to give him a hug.
yeah, yeah.
I want to give him a hug.
And so how do we continually enter into those things? How do we continually be conscious enough about if our unconscious is saying, let's get the fuck out of here? Because that's what the storytelling is. That's what talking about superficial stuff is. It's like, I want out of
Oh,
here.
or
And
I don't want to let him in, and I don't want to let anybody in.
yes.
Or it's this is so boring. I'm I just want to
Well, that's a
pass the
different gig.
time. That's different.
Yeah, that's a different gig. But if you tell me I broke my arm and I start telling you about my friend in high school had a friend that broke their arm on the football field, that's a way for me to get out. That's different than entering in and saying, what happened? How are you doing? I can almost feel the pain in my arm when you tell me about how much pain you've been experiencing. What can I do to help and support?
So do we? It this what the word that keeps coming to mind while you're saying this is how, and I've heard this all my life. Um, it's to have this selfless life, in the sense that it's not about me. It's about that life of serving, that life of giving, that life of, even if it's giving attention, I'm giving that other person my attention right now rather than trying to steal that attention for myself. And dang, that's hard.
That's very hard. So I have a question for you and for all who are watching this. When we work toward that selfless life, which I agree with, that's a major piece to work toward. Many people will go, well, how do I get my needs met? So how do we do that? What happens relationally to get our needs met?
Well, oh, ye have little faith. You have to trust, right? Trust yourself, trust your partner, trust the situation, trust the universe. I've said in the past, God, make sure the birds have food, or make sure I have enough money to go buy the birds food in the case of my house. But does he let the birds starve? No. Are we going to, you know, there is the the joy of truly giving. And that is, I don't think I truly gave until I was 55, 50, in my 50s, where I was conscious of giving with no expectation. We've talked about this. Giving, we talked about it with mentoring on that show. Like,
Right.
I'm giving advice with no expectation. The reward, the return, the universe pays you back with a good feeling that you did that, which is incredibly nourishing. So if we were asking how am I going to get my needs met, well, they'll get met. I just trust that. It's like, I want to make sure that person that's on the other side of the screen, or the other side of a hug, or the other side of a handshake, is, let's, for this brief period in the moment of in the universe time, I'm caring more about them than I am about myself. And
Mhm.
as a result, that's going to come back. And again, hard, hard to do.
That's incredibly hard to do. And my core belief is that we can have that a fundamental shift needs to be initiated. And you hit on the point. The point that you made is when somebody is struggling or somebody is saying something, your point is, how do many of us, many people will say, how do I make it about me? So if you say, going back, yeah, I broke my arm, and I go, oh, you should see how bad such and such broke their arm. Well, my arm, you broke your arm one place, man. When I was like 18, I broke mine in two places. Um, and even with horses, when if I go, I want my horse to like me, that's about me. Those relationships that because part of what has happened over this last couple of weeks for me is me having really, in some ways, doing an inventory of those people in my life who I have incredibly deep relationships with. And though the relationships I have that are incredibly deep, instead of me saying, hey, Mark, I want you to meet these needs. And instead of you saying, hey, Dewey, I want you to meet these needs. Because if we're here and I'm going, I need this, and you go, I need this, that's pulling us apart. If I go, Mark, tell me what you need, and you go, Dewey, tell me what you need. So instead of having a relationship that's built on pulling here, no, I need this. No, I need this. It's more like,
Notice how you're saying no every time, by the way.
yeah,
Ladies and
yeah, yeah.
gentlemen, pay attention to how many times he just said no.
Yes, exactly. Versus, Mark, what is it that you need? What would help you right now? And you go, well, this would probably help me. Well, what would help you, Dewey? Well, this would probably help me. So instead of this, it's this.
You're building, right? That's each one. Each was a little block. Ladies and gentlemen, go back to the second show, and we talked about how we build intimacy and how we build a relationship is just these small little experiences. I have to share that, as we've talked many times, that this show is at the end of a week. It's also the beginning of a week. And for me, in the sense that this show is a tone setter for the thing I'm going to be thinking about. And there's so many callbacks I find that I use in my day job.
Right.
The notion of that, hey, we're not going to get to here with this prospect or this, we're building a relationship with a customer, and I'm not transactional. I'm always building a relationship through story. And even though I am trying to sell something at the end of the day, it's still about solving a bigger problem for them. How can I help them? And it's my partner wants these big leaps. And we'll keep saying, no, it's fine. We're going to have a better, stronger, firmer, long-term relationship if we we don't need to push it. It's okay. We're fine, because then it's about us. Well, I need to make progress in this. I need to move this conversation along. I need to get to goal. I get that. We're guys. We want to get to goal. But again, trust the process, right? Trust that, no, you'll get there. Eye on the prize. Yep, I know where it is. I'm going to get there. I want to get back to this, to being able to tap into the unconscious. And I'm reminded of a book by Stephen Pressfield, who wrote The War of Art. And his books are,
sounds like a really cool book.
It's phenomenal. We send it to all of our clients. We just sent out 8 of them yesterday. The War of Art is the internal war that we have with the creative process. And his core idea is that it's resistance, and resistance shows its head in so many different ways. And you, as someone who's creative, not necessarily an artist, but someone who's creative, you will find resistance everywhere. And your job as an artist is to battle it. And he's written a lot of books, but his second to last one, called The Artist's Journey, talked about it. Really, the subtext of that was the journey into your unconscious, and how you can tap into, because that's where your creativity lives there. And if you want to be more creative, you need to figure out how to clear away the bullshit and be able to tap into that. And then, in fact, you can get to a point where you're doing that more often than not. I'm curious what you think about that concept.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if this fits, is that from a therapeutic place, I'm bringing in another world here that'll connect, hopefully. Many times, anybody here who's ever taken a psychology course, which probably many people who will hear this have, there is there's the perspective of resistance. There's some resistance to something. And from a therapeutic place, what I talk about is that I don't think there's any such thing as resistance.
Ooh.
And this will tie in. I do think that there is protection.
Okay.
So let's say that you're my client, and just so that you and everyone else knows that will never happen because it's a different relationship, but let's say you're my client and I go, wow, you're being resistive, Mark's just so resistive. What that's really saying is I'm blaming you for me not knowing what to do.
Oh. Wow.
If I come in and say, wow, in this particular situation, Mark is being incredibly protective. How can I help protect him?
How can I help protect him, or
Protect him. How can I join him in protecting himself? Same way with my horse. My horse is doing a certain thing. My horse is not being resistant. My horse is being protective of something.
So travel down that a second. So if I'm coaching you, which of course I would never try to do, but I'm coaching. We're back to our show about mentoring. I'm
Sure.
coaching, and the person's being resistant. They're no butting me. Instead of yes anding me, they're no butting me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this. No, but I'm not gonna be able. No, that they're resisting. Are you saying that they're protecting themselves at that time?
They're
from
protecting
what?
themselves from something.
Okay. The way I internalized that was, and to your point where you said it was really about the person who was on the other side of the resistance, not the resistor, is I'm not doing an effective job of communicating to get past that protection, to get past that resistance. So the higher order bit is to understand, okay, they're resisting, which means they're protecting themselves. I don't know what that is. Do I have time to figure out what that is, or do I need to work on my messaging to find the chink in that protection, because I know that they need to hear this?
Well,
Is that close?
Very close. And
Okay.
it's probably some combination of both. And going back to the author that you spoke about,
Stephen Pressfield.
Stephen Pressfield, and it's The Art
of War.
The Art of War. And that he was talking about.
It's this war of resistance as you're creating. It's like, so you're a writer and you sit down and you're a block. You have a block. I can't. That's resistance. Or oh yeah, I'm gonna write, but I got to go take out the trash. Or there's always something that's standing between you and the thing you need to do, and not a chore. I mean, the thing you need to do, which is get this out of your unconscious into your conscious and out into the world. And forcing yourself to do that thing is pushing through resistance to doing that thing.
And what I'm suggesting is that if I'm sitting down to write and I'm going over here, I flip up
Get a
YouTube,
cup of coffee.
Get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got to
Yeah.
pee. Now, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. The inner question is what am I protecting?
So what do you, this is
So
fantastic.
let me add
What are you protecting?
Good. It could be a lot of things. It could be that if I write something, I think someone won't like it. So why would I write it? It could be, my grammar is not good enough. It could be, Well, other people talked about this before. I don't have anything to add.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it could be. Um, it could be that somebody told me in 8th grade I wasn't a good writer, and I haven't finished that up. It could be all of those kinds of things. And it's not just that I'm doing something because I'm resisting you. It might look like that. But if we can join the people that we're working with or living with in protecting them, if instead of doing this, we can come and do this beside them and see it from their perspective, then I can help protect. And in fact, it's an interesting, and this just happened in the dojo yesterday. It was the last session in the dojo where the sensei was saying in Aikido, and I know other martial arts do this too, but in Aikido, there's almost always a time where you're moving and you're looking the same way your opponent is looking, so that you can see what they're seeing. So if I'm here and I'm coming in with a particular technique, I'm not just here. I will move around and I may be standing right next to them. That's what we're talking about. It's like, what are you seeing? Where do you need to go? Same way with my horse. If I'm on my horse, and actually there was an incident where I was just messing around out in the field, and I was going between 2 trailers, and they were pretty close, and my horse didn't want to go through them. It felt too close to him. I could go, oh, my horse is resisting. My horse is, I've gone through stuff 10 times as narrow as that with him. Why can't he do it like he did before? I could, be pushing on him. I could be kicking him. It's like, if I look through his eyes, it's like, what's he need protection from?
Mm-hmm.
And what was really interesting was it was a fairly narrow space, and there was one place where I could have possibly hooked a stirrup on if I went through. And I looked at that place and I felt that in my body, and that's when he stopped.
Mm.
So this is another aspect of looking at this, is what I could perceive as his resistance is him actually protecting me.
Mm-hmm. And that was was that primarily unconscious?
Initially it was, and that's what you just said, is I think our brains went to the same place at the same time. It's like, how do I make that unconscious aspect conscious?
Maybe.
Okay, keep going.
That's unconscious competence. That's what we talked about. The highest order bit is unconscious competence. Right? There's the unconscious incompetence. Like, I don't even know I'm fucking up. There's conscious incompetence. Hey, I know I fucked up. There's conscious competence. Hey, I'm doing a pretty good job. And there's unconscious competence. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. That's how I solve. Just do it. You don't even think about it. It's the whole point. You didn't think about it. Neither you nor the horse you are so skilled at that level, because you're ninth dawn horseman. And that one I'm giving you, bud. You don't get to take that. You just say thank you.
Thank you. And I will say it took me a minute to figure out what happened, just so you know. I want to be really honest about this. It was like, what happened here?
Right.
but I could look at it from the point of protection versus resistance. That opens up our consciousness. That opens up our awareness. That means instead of 85-15, we can be 50-50,
Mm-hmm.
which is that's wrapping back around to where we started today.
I want to take us back to some coping mechanisms, because I think this might be something that guys are feeling. All of us, not guys, just we feel that lost in a crowd thing where I'm with a group of people. I'm currently listening to Coach Gino from the Yukon women's basketball team, 10-time national award. Won the NCAA championship 10 years, 10 different times. He's doing a master class on leadership and talking about teams, and he's making really great correlations between sports and business and any kind of collective effort, right? And if he were to hear us say, or hear you say, curious what he would say, I was with a team, because you were a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 2 weeks and felt alone. And I'm just, it's got me thinking in my head. Here's a question. Did you feel, was that a conscious sense last weekend when we talked? Had you already picked that up in the first week, or was that something that evolved over the second week?
I was picking it up the first week, and inside me I was going, new people first week, lots happening. This will deepen as we go through the second week. That was my internal process.
So I'm thinking about loneliness, actually. When is that just makes me sad, honestly. I feel sad when someone feels lonely. I've had I've felt alone, but in general I don't. And I'm not very good alone. Actually, not very good alone. And I know that about myself. And the sense that even around a bunch of people, so I wonder how many people are listening right now have that, can completely identify that's a condition current in their life. So here's gosh darn, it takes me a long time to get to questions sometimes.
You do great.
What's something that they could do today to flip the script on that? Because that's a story you're telling yourself, right? We've talked about that. It's a story you're telling yourself. I feel alone. You're telling yourself instead of, gosh, I feel. And it could be a true story. How do you flip the script?
I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. Flip the script from.
So here's here. I'm going to get right to the nub. So this event has now ended. There's nothing you can do to go back in time to change that. Now, upon reflection, do you think there was something you could have done so that you ameliorated that sense of loneliness?
Yes. And I knew it then, and I made the choice not to do it.
Oh, why was that?
Almost every situation that I'm in, I lead.
Mm. Yeah.
And that would have put me back into a leadership position. And two things. One is I respect the leaders tremendously. So I chose not to. I would never, ever undermine them. And two is I just, I, I just sometimes don't want to leave. I just want to be. And three, it was interesting. Since I was the only man in that group,
I just went to the leadership would have been mansplaining human connectivity to a bunch of women, right?
that's how it could have felt.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and um, and there were numbers of times during the week where even in the dojo, someone would say, "Oh, well, I came at you super hard because you're a man." And or something would happen. It's like, yeah, well, you're a man. And
Hmm.
and it was, I just didn't, I did not want to go there.
Hmm. So in
So there's the
one
protection.
sense, it was, yeah. It was self-control, right?
Yes.
And it was very intentional. So I think you should feel fabulous this weekend.
Actually, there's, as we're
You're a
talking,
master
this
of your own domain.
on some levels, this chat has helped me. It's like, yeah,
I told you that was I had an intention. I set an intention
yes,
before
you
we
did.
talked and said,
And
we'll figure out how I can help my good friend Dewey.
thank you. And I also knew that I had a place to come home to that is great.
This is what matters. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and that's what really
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah. Again,
And
that's the master of your own domain. Like I don't need to teach these people anything. I could, I'm capable,
that
but
is
there's
true.
no percentage in it. There's no, could I help them see, I wanted to say the error of their ways, but see that
There's not,
maybe that there's a higher order, as Grandmaster Rick will say to me, this is an opportunity to train. That's what he would
yes,
say. This is an opportunity to train. So in this case, it wasn't, this is an opportunity to train others. This is an opportunity to train myself. There we go.
there we go. And that's exactly what did happen. And I'm working on integrating that.
So
And
as
so that would be
people
the
head
other,
off
yeah.
into their week, how do we look at these situations that are actually, this is the core idea of the story I'm going to tell, which is buried inside every struggle is an opportunity. You just need to find
Yes,
it.
that exactly. And in horsemanship, we talk about two things. One is a release. And that's like if there's pressure on your reins and your horse releases, then you also release, but you're also releasing from the inside. The other is relief. And relief is allowing our horses and ourselves the time to process. And sometimes that's 5 minutes, and sometimes that's 5 days, and sometimes that's 5 weeks. So allowing that with ourselves, which is a huge part of our consciousness. And going, yep, that's what I'm going to allow myself to do.
Part of why the elder council works is we've lived through enough to be able to have that kind of awareness. And what we hope for those who are listening is to give themselves the gift of considering there is space for that level of awareness in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a
If
great little bookend. I want to hear. No, you got a PS. I got to hear your PS.
the PS is, if anybody can take some of this and not have to go through,
Oh God, please send us cards and letters. We want to
yeah,
hear.
send us cards and letters. And if you don't have to go through some of this stuff, if you can get it from us, that gives you the chance to go way up here without, you can struggle up here instead of down here.
We call that collapsing time around here. How do we collapse time? Right.
That's the perfect place to stop.
There you go. Hey, I love you, man.